Let me show you a quick vanilla JavaScript trick that makes your code faster to write and easier to read. If you find yourself typing document.querySelector over and over, then this is for you. No frameworks needed. Let's get started. We're going to start with some plain HTML. We've got a header, a few paragraph blocks with different classes, a to-do list, which is what we're going to make, and a simple form which has an input box and a submit button. It currently does nothing. Let's add some JavaScript. Here we're just waiting for the DOM to load and we can get started. First, let's get a reference to the form so we can listen to the submit event. For that, we use document.querySelector and the form has an ID of item form. There you go. Now we can add an event listener on the submit event. Let's just stop the form from submitting back to the server, and let's just make sure we've got this. We got it. Okay, next we want to see what the user typed in, so let's use the query selector again to get the input value. So we've got an input box with a name of item name, and we get the value. Let's make sure we still got it. Okay, so now we know the name and we can add it onto the to-do list. We're going to need a reference to the to-do list. And we're going query selector again, to-do list. Okay, we want to add the input value as a list item to this list. So let's create an ally. And let's set the text content of that. And let's append it to the list. Okay, are we there? Are we there? There we are. Let's just clear the input box after we press enter so it's easier to use. I'm going to press Ctrl W a few times to get the selection I want. Ctrl Alt V to stick this in a variable, call it input box, and change it to a const. Thank you very much. Right, and at the end, input box to value is nothing. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Okay. This is still quite a small example. How about we add a little bit more so that we can just delete items we've added? I'm just going to rush through this. Here we go. So let's create a delete button. We need to set the type. There button. Let's just make this a simple cross. That'll do. Okay, and when we click on it, we get a reference to the button that was clicked. We want to find the nearest ally element, and we want to remove this from the UL. So we can just do this, ul.remove child. And we need to add this to the ally. Okay, let's see how this looks. Okay, made some mistakes. Let's delete them. Oh, beautiful. Okay, one last thing to do. We have the status class here. It's initially not displayed. We want to add the number of items on the status class. So we need a reference to this p tag and this item count tag. We're going to change the display when we add something and increment this. Let's do that down here. Just call this status element. And we've got that query selector again. So that's p.status. Let's make sure we're displaying it. Excuse me. And let's get a reference to the span. So that is span.itemCount. And we're doing query selector once again. Okay, now we need a count of the ally elements. So this is maybe not the best way to do it, but I want to do it this way to show how we can look up lists of nodes. So let's get all the allies. And we've got this document.query selector all. We can just type ally. If we want to make it a bit more specific, we can go to-do list ally. Okay, and now we have a count. So we can just set the item count element text content to all the allies.length. Okay, let's have a look at this. Right, now there are 1 items. Okay. 2, 3. If we delete them, then we have a little bug. Okay, let's fix that real quick. Okay, we select the item count code, Control-Alt-M to extract into a function. Let's stick it, probably anywhere is fine actually. So update item count. Okay, and we can just call this from here. Let's try that. 1, 3, 2. God, I can't type. Okay, there we have it. We have finished on the old style plain JavaScript. So let's have a look. Readable, it's pretty straightforward, but now we're going to sprinkle a little bit of that syntactic sugar on and see how we can make this a bit nicer. But look, there's a lot of these query selectors everywhere. From here, let's highlight them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's query selector all. Okay, so there's 5 of them. We can do a little trick that your browser already does, in fact. Check this out. If I go into the DevTools on the console, and I want to get a reference to, say, this span here, I can actually use this dollar function. Span.item, item count. Okay, so let's just replace our document.query selectors with a $. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. $. Okay. Is this going to work? Doesn't look very good. Dollar's not defined. Hello. Okay, so the $sign is just a nice little thing that is only available from the DevTools by default, but we can make this easy. We can just assign the query selector function to it. So let's try that. Okay, is this going to work? Let's see. Query selector called on an object that does not implement interface document. Okay, so assigning the function on its own does not work. That's because it's lost the reference to the document as part of, but we can give the reference back easily. We just bind it back to the document. Okay, no errors. Gonna close that. 1, 2, 3. Nice. So now our code is a little bit smaller. Let's make the same thing for query selector all. And in fact, we can do this from DevTools already, but here's what it looks like. $. And we've only got 1 query selector all, but hey, it's still good. I still like it. Okay, and we are creating a lot of elements as well. Well, not too many in this case, but if you are writing vanilla JavaScript, this can get a bit out of hand. So let's keep binding functions to nice little calls. So I like to call document.createElement just L. And once again, we can bind to the document. So let's look for all these document.createElements. 1, 2. Okay, I need 2. Well, we've not really reduced the size of this, but we've just made things a little bit nicer, and when you are looking at things, it's just faster to write in document.query selector. I quite like that. Okay, let's just clean things up a little bit though. We can make this nicer now. We can inline a few things. This form is only used in one place, so we don't really need to keep a reference to it. So Control-Alt-N to inline it. One occurrence only. Okay, it's a bit smaller. Now I've just set how I liked document.query selector, but when we're working with a form and the form inputs have names like this does here, item name, We can actually reference these directly from the form object. The form object is on e.target. So e.target is the form, and we can just write the name of the name. Let's make sure that works. Yep, still works. So this is actually a bit nicer. It's more self-contained. We're not doing a search on the document to get the item. We're going direct on the form that we have submitted. Okay, let's see what else we can do. There's no point to keep a reference to this input value. Let's get rid of that. And another little shortcut I like to do is to use the fact that append child returns the thing we are appending. So we can move this to the place we create it. Let's do the same for the list item. We create it all the way back here. Things are getting a little nicer. Make sure they work. Yep. Okay, I've broken this. So let's have a look at what we've done here. Oh, I'm sorry, I did something stupid. I should have bound the query selector all item. Okay, not unusual for me to do something stupid. Yoink. So, what's next? Well, we don't really need to keep a reference to the status element. Let's inline that. Control-Alt-N. Gone. Don't really like this function hanging around here. We can actually move this underneath the handler here. And we're going to use this in one place. Inline that. And let's just inline that as well. That function now is smaller. Now I'm not necessarily going for the smallest, most dense code possible, but I think this is easier to read. Look, find the span with the item count, set the text to be the length of the number of allies in our to-do list. And I think that's about all I want to do on this. Would this be simpler in a framework rather than plain JavaScript? Maybe, maybe not. But from the user's point of view, this is going to load fast. You're never going to have troubles debugging this, and it really is quite straightforward. This reduces boilerplate without losing readability. The $ and $$ shortcuts are simple additions that make vanilla JavaScript a joy to work with. Enjoy.